News First, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And a splendid morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo, and broadcasting on TV1, live on Facebook, and a little bit later on YouTube. And we are all, of course, part of the Capital Maharaja Group. And this morning, to discuss poverty and how perhaps we could focus our efforts on poverty alleviation, is the chairman of the Centre for Poverty Analysis, Mr. Murtaza Esufally. Very good morning to you, Mr. Esufally.
Good morning.
And thank you very much for being on the program. Now then, how does one measure poverty? What is...
So the most popular measure is income and expenditure.
Yeah.
So absolute poverty is, I think, measured at $1.25 per person per day. So by that definition, Sri Lanka is at about 4% of absolute poverty. You know, that's about 850,000 people.
Right.
But over the years, the definition of poverty has become more sophisticated and more refined, and there are many other dimensions that are extremely important in trying to understand poverty. So, for example, Amartya Sen some years ago said, well, you could look at how much you have to spend on food, but if you look at how well people are nourished, that's two sides of the that shows a different dimension. So you can have money, but can you have enough nourishment? And now, a definition I like is by the Oxford Group of Human Development, and they talk about things like decent work, safety from physical harm. Do you have? Can you go about without shame? Do you have? The kind of measures around dignity. So we need a more nuanced and a richer definition to really understand what's going on.
Successive governments have launched many poverty alleviation programs like Samurdhi and so on. Have they really lifted the poor out of this abyss?
Well, absolute poverty has certainly come down, right, at least by the definition of income or expenditure.
And how much do you say we needed a day?
For example, in 2013, I think absolute poverty was around 6.7%.
Right.
And today it's come down to about 4.1%. So that's about 1.2 million people to about 850,000 people. Right. So there's been clear progress. It could be a combination of private sector, government. So we certainly have made progress. But whether things like, say, social security, if you have illness, if you look at the quality of work, for example, the quality of jobs, has that improved? Most people depend on government jobs or migrating overseas. So if you look at the kind of quality of work that's made available, full-time, secure jobs of high quality. So when you look at those dimensions, I think we have a long way to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we remember that unfortunate incident a few days ago at that sort of some plant in Horana. And one wondered, how on earth, in this modern day and age and all that, could someone actually fall into a well of ammonia. And it appeared to me, just by that little narrow bit of information, that there were no health and safety precautions in place, and yet they were an ongoing business. And we do have sort of health and safety sort of inspectors, whatever they're called over here. And it seems to me that they've been rather flippant and ignored all the norms, and then it's resulted in these deaths. Is it that people who are poor can't expect any rights or any, do you know what I mean, some sort of safety measures?
Yeah, I mean that's a, it's a very important question. As we industrialize, there are sort of hazardous jobs out there, and our legal framework and the system of penalties is quite sort of limited compared to, say, the Western world. The onus, if there is an accident, in the UK and in the Western world, the burden of proof is on the employer to show that he has taken all precautions. Whereas in our part of the world, the employee has to go and prove that the employer was negligent. So legal safeguards are limited in this country, and I think also the awareness of health and safety and precautions to be taken. It is, you're dealing with say chemicals in this case, a lot of complexity. So I'm not sure whether companies have employed and recruited the best people to understand all the aspects of health and safety and how you do it in a systematic way. You have to. There's training involved. There's awareness involved. There's a lot of employees are also casual about taking their health and safety precautions. Sometimes the rules are there, but the facilities are there, but compliance is weak.
Now then, unfortunately, this keeps going back to politics as well. Allegations that corrupt politicians, and they have to be corrupt for doing this, that corrupt politicians exploit poverty and these sort of schemes like Samurti for their own political survival, and to get to virtually coerce people into voting for them. Is that really prevalent? Well, I mean, we know it happens, but is it really that widespread?
Well, I mean, I'm not a sort of authority or an expert on that subject, but I think what has been great is things like the Right to Information Act, which makes any member of the public or the media be able to access how these funds have been spent. And I do hope that we have a culture of citizenry and media using this kind of legislative framework that's now in place to demand how these monies are being used. There's a lot of money being used for Samurdhi. I think
we've just had the former, well, I say just some months ago, we've had the former presidential secretary being given a jail term for three-year jail term for using state funds. Of course, that was state funds, but they say that they gave the money to buy Silready. So much of it that it beggars belief. But there you go. We've had somebody, and I suppose the Silready is being distributed to the people, the needy. And all sorts of jolly misadventures are happening in the name of poverty alleviation. But what is being done to, rather than just to service the poor, what is being done to sustain them into, to get them out of this abyss of poverty and to get them on their feet, independent and carry on with life? What more can be done? What is being done?
So I think the Sustainability Development Goals are a very useful framework for government and for companies and civil organizations who want to make an impact and want to make a difference. There are very clear goals. There are, in 2030 there are 17 clear goals, and there are ways of measuring it. Government is, I think, still working on, with the help of the UN, how to measure these, and I think that if companies also can incorporate it as part of their sustainability efforts, so that it becomes at the very center and at the very heart of what they're doing, not CSR as a sort of a sideshow. And it is then I think it's not then up to that a particular minister to decide on what kind of poverty alleviating measures are to be taken. This is a kind of a global call to action. This is a kind of an accepted sort of framework and a set of measures. What gets measured gets done usually, and Sri Lanka, like virtually every country in the world, will be held accountable for these sustainability development goals, which we've also signed up to. So I think that's an excellent framework to be able to get sharper about what we need to be doing. Are we making impact? Are we making progress on poverty?
And what about the private sector here? Do you sometimes, I get the feeling that the government is just pass this buck on, not willingly or unwillingly, they just don't care. But the private sector seems to have got on, and there are a number of companies with highly valued and CSR programs that reach right in there. And I can obviously mention what we do in part of our group, and which has now become a movement, which is the Gammada movement, from village to village.
It's an excellent initiative.
And you've heard of that program?
I've actually used it, yes.
Oh, you've used it?
Yes.
Oh, really?
To get a bridge built in a small village near a piece of land I owned. Okay. And I was actually amazed at the impact it had. Right. Just one call to MTV, and the film crew went there and created so much pressure on the local village leaders and the politicians there that I think within a year or so that bridge got built.
Well, usually when our teams go there into a village, the people are instantly energized. And if you were in the battery business, that would be something to look at from an advertising point of view, because the people are really energized to see our crew in black and their distinctive T-shirts, and they know that delivery is here. It's like the UPS man has turned up, But then, how much can the government expect
from the private
sector? We'll address that question soon after this break. Don't go away. After all, this is Newsline. Welcome back to Newsline, and we're joined here this morning by Mr. Murtaza Esufally, the chairman of the Centre for Poverty Analysis. Mr. Esufally, I'm going to show you a slide here, which will hopefully come up now. There you go. And that's the poverty headcount ratio by the different sectors. And the yellow line there is the one that deals with the estate sector, and that's still on top. I know that the figures are looking sort of good in the sense that, judging by this, it's about 800,000 people. But on top of the list is the estate sector, and I haven't seen all the figures, but I'm pretty certain that the estate sector is always on the top of that list. Why is that? I mean, we're 150 years in the tea business. We're 150 years plus now, and our tea is acknowledged to be the world leader. It's the best thing, Ceylon tea, and all that. But it saddens me when I travel around and look at these people who are living in line houses, generations living in there, And it can't be right in this day and age that somebody is so forced into some form of if they need to get housing, then they need to be working there, and that kind of thing is something of the past. It's some pre-Victorian age thing.
No, it's an embarrassment because the estate sector has always been a lagging indicator, and this is the problem with big statistics like, absolute poverty is 4%. We forget the pockets of poverty that exist in this country, the Munragalas, Mullathivus, and the estate sector, where and I think the private sector has a big role to play because also ultimately government's resources are finite, and there are so many demands on them, and usually where the biggest political constituencies is where sometimes resources get channeled. So the estate sector has been, I think, relatively weak when it comes to being able to demand from the political leadership more resources. And it's also some of the structural issues, like land ownership and housing ownership and all of that makes it harder for people who live in that to come out of it. But the tea industry is a huge industry in Sri Lanka, and you see a whole young generation of people who are now migrating out of the estates to want to work in the service sector in the rest of the country or in manufacturing. And so if the companies who have a commercial interest in that area don't actually make that work more dignified or more decent, or introduce automation and make it more sort of more appealing. We're not going to have a workforce.
In the estate sector, in the tea side, they complain, a favourite complaint is, and I've heard it on our programs as well, is that our production costs are so high, and then they compare it to, let's say, Kenya. But what they're not saying is that in Kenya, the tea bushes are considerably younger than ours, which means our replanting programs are a little bit
more intensive.
Yeah, and also, this must be the only country in the world where people have a dream, and then you can't use this weedy side or that weedy side because somebody had a dream, and the whole blessed thing. I'm talking about glyphosate, and so you have that, and everything goes lopsided because some person with some form of influence has had a dream. There's no scientific basis. Instead, they ought to have. But the bottom line is that the people who are working there, like these people in, like the estate workers, they're just left behind. And I'm grateful for one of these viewers who sent, one of our viewers who sent this message in, and perhaps you might want to take up on that. It says, the Sri Lankan entrepreneur has to face the highest power tariff in the world, numerous taxes, multiple cash calls from local politicians, cash calls from the bureaucrats, and many levels of regulatory compliances. The employee, by the way, falls by the wayside. Is that pretty good analysis of what is faced by business and entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka? Doing business these days is increasingly difficult. So as economic growth has slowed down, the taxation has gone up, regulations are intensifying, and the cost of doing business is going up. There's a shortage of good people, skilled people. So it is extremely challenging to operate in this kind of environment, and increasingly more and more companies are, at least the bigger companies, are trying to establish markets outside Sri Lanka and find opportunities overseas. It's been really challenging. And is it coming at the cost of employees? I think we all
have to fight for the best employees, and whether it's pay or other perks or
how do you find it in your group? Obviously, everybody knows from which group you are from. Can't mention the name, but anyway, everyone knows where you're from, which group you're connected to, and so on. But how do you find it in your group? How are you attracting talent? Is there this huge brain drain that's going out?
Yes, it's a constant challenge. So what we've focused on is, firstly we have to be reasonably competitive. So we do salary surveys and make sure that we are, in the zone, comparable to competitors. But we've got to do much more than that. So we've identified 4 pillars for our what we call our promise to employees. So firstly, wellness and well-being and wellness. So we have a very interesting program which will take me the rest of the program to explain.
Right.
But committed to making the healthiest employees in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful program, and people are enjoying it, are seeing the benefits of it. Secondly, we look at how we can harness the unique talents of our employees. So we, whether from talent shows or giving them time off to do their, whatever they're passionate about. We feel that a lot of employees like to work in our group because of the empowerment that they have. And so particularly young, bright people, giving them more authority, more challenging assignments, and trusting them to lead important projects is something that we do. And we spend a lot on training and development and making people the best they can be.
You could almost be talking about this group, because for example on the Gammata program, the number of CEOs of each project are young people from our group out there, and they do this all in their own time. If they on the English news, for example, if they come on there, they can do it, but they don't impact on the roster, because at the end of the day we've got something to do as well. So,
but Faraz, one important point there is that a lot of young people want to work for organizations now that are committed to much more than profit, and are committed to making an impact in their environment, socially, environmentally. I'm amazed at a lot of young people, when you have some, a deep conversation with them, why do you actually work for us? It's not about the size of the company or how big you are in the industry, but it's because of some project we're doing for early childhood development, or the kind of efforts we've taken with employees. And increasingly, if companies don't embrace things like sustainability development goals, they're not going to be able to attract the best and the brightest. The best and the brightest always have choices, and they are looking for organizations that stand for something much bigger than narrow financial and economic interests.
In the last couple of minutes, I have a question from a viewer. Why should the private sector bother about poverty? Isn't addressing poverty the duty of the state?
I know I would disagree, Faraz. Firstly, if you have poverty, then your consumer doesn't have enough spending power. So it's in our enlightened self-interest to be able to create more consumer spending and markets. Secondly, the increasing the inequality causes tension in society, and it is not easy to operate and win trust of consumers or employees if there is this high degree of a lot of poverty on the one hand, and a lot of say rich companies and corporations. So for that reason, you need to it's important for private sector to try and help with that problem. And the third thing is that, I think it's the private sector in many countries that actually help to transform societies, whether it's skilling people, whether it's R&D, innovation, creating products that even the poor can use. Many companies in Sri Lanka have grown on the back of, say, for example, making a small, making sachet products. So even somebody with, just a few rupees can enjoy some of these products. And actually it has worked well for the companies, and people themselves may not be able to enjoy something every day, but for once a week they could, whether it's a shampoo or whether it's a bit of coffee, a nice quality coffee. So there's if there are so many poor people, you're not going to have educated workforce.
Right. Well, that's the answer to that. So the answer is that no, poverty alleviation is not only the business of the state, but the corporate world also has a role to play, and increasingly, though, they are. But the problem is, Mr. Esufally, that I sometimes get the feeling that the government is taking these things for granted, and taking the private sector for granted, and say, oh, well, they'll do that. Why should we bother? So we'll just buy a few more Mercs or whatever it is for ourselves. And you said earlier that there is a shortage of money. But I almost have to disagree, because there is no shortage of money when it comes to corruption. And this, all we have to do is look at the levels of state-level corruption, and then we can understand that they seem to have the money for that. And what is the what-if scenario?
I wish that there would be more partnerships between government and the private sector in dealing with things like poverty. Our own company has spent the last 13 or 14 years working on early childhood care and development with the Ministry of Child Development. And why that partnership has created impact in this space has been the fact that the government and the ministry has a lot of technical understanding of the subject and have credibility, especially in the towns and in the poor areas, working with, say, provincial councils. So when we go to them by ourselves, there's a lot of suspicion, and what are these people trying to do? Are they trying to get something? So when you go with government, there's a sort of you get your credentials are stronger, and you can actually make a difference. And what the private sector has is more financial resources, has more energy, has less bureaucracy, so you can actually get out and get things done, like your Gamadiya program. So I wish there'd be much more coming together of government departments and ministries that understand the problem, or that perhaps has the statistics, has the information, and team up with private sector companies to tackle problems in a very focused way that can cause lasting impact.
And perhaps there should be more cooperation and more togetherness amongst the different corporates too, because then that'd be even more impactful. Murtaza Esufally, Chairman of the Centre for Poverty Analysis, thank you very much.
Thank you,
and perhaps you'll come back on our show another time and tell us all about the corporate world. In the meantime, thank you. And that's all it was from Newsline today. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.